Welcome to the Touch MBA Admissions Podcast. Do you need help figuring out which schools to apply to or how to get into the world's top MBA programs? Hey, you're not alone. Join thousands of others on this podcast and on our site, touchmba.com, as they seek the admissions edge. And now, here's your host, Darren Joe.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Touch MBA podcast. I'm your host, Darren. Glad to have you here. This week, I interviewed Justin Taines, who recently graduated from the Rotterdam School of Management MBA program in 2020. And I really love this conversation because Justin has a really unique background. He's from creative development. He developed kids and family entertainment shows and animation studios, and even his own cannabis venture before deciding to apply for his MBA. So in this conversation, I talked to Justin about why he decided to apply abroad for his MBA, especially being a relatively more experienced candidate with over 10 years of work experience, what that has been like, and especially as COVID hit in the middle of last year. And I think that's something that a lot of you will need to plan for, unfortunately. And so Justin was forced into a hybrid learning environment. He had to do his recruiting online, and we delved deep into that experience. And I really think you'll be able to benefit from Justin's open and candid thoughts on what the experience has been like, and find this episode really, really useful. If you need help with school selection, as Justin did all the way back in 2019, do hop over to touchmba.com, where we offer you free school selection help. So check that out at touchmba.com, and let's get to my conversation with Justin. Here we go. Justin, thank you so much for your time. Thanks for coming on the podcast. Could you please give a just quick introduction to our audience?
Yes, of course. And thank you for having me. I don't know if I can mention this enough, but Touch MBA was a huge resource for me when I was scouting business schools and the idea of going to business school. So it's an honor to be here talking about my experience afterwards. And I hope that it can benefit people the same way that it really benefited me during my process. So the quick background on me is I am from Los Angeles. And yes, I just finished school in Holland. I work in creative development. Most people don't know what that is. So I come from kids and family entertainment. I ideate or identify properties that would make great shows. I used to work in features, now TV. I've placed shows at name brand studios like DreamWorks and Nelvana. Creative development quickly turned into business development. I helped build a 120,000 square foot animation studio in Florida. I became a consultant to the city of Jerusalem, helping them build up their animation industry. And because I'm from Los Angeles, in California, we have, pun intended, quite the budding cannabis industry. So I worked in cannabis for a few years. I sold my first retail and cultivation venture and then moved into consulting, helping companies design their business models, brand strategies. After working with and building my own successful and failing entrepreneurships and little companies, I realized that I didn't know what I didn't know. So I wanted to pursue a real business foundation. And open myself up to more opportunity, especially internationally, which is why I chose an overseas MBA. And of course, which I think most students discuss, is wanting to do a rebrand and be able to sort of have access to other industry segments and roles that you might not have been able to access before prior to the degree or the education.
Oh my gosh. So I'm sure you definitely piqued our audience's interest. We've never had someone from kids and family entertainment on the show in the cannabis industry as well. Let's kind of start with when you approached us, because when I was preparing for this podcast, and I hope you don't mind me sharing this, but I was laughing when I read it. So you wrote us this email, and this is what you said. Let me pull this up. You said, my concerns. I'm 38. My undergrad was a wacky art school. 3.3 GPA. I haven't taken a test in over 15 years. That's not a major concern, just something to note since I'll be cramming for the GMAT. Goals, entertainment, tech, cannabis. Schools, you were all over the map, right? You were looking at top schools in New York, Columbia, NYU Stern, USC, INSEAD, HKU in Hong Kong, Toronto, Rotman, Rotterdam. So walk me through your thought process here. Why now? The vaunted why now question for Justin at 38.
Yeah, I mean, again, touching upon sort of a bit of my intros, I didn't know what I didn't know. And I was looking at different programs that I thought would be appropriate for someone my age. I wasn't sure. I went in very raw, knowing that I wanted this education, but not knowing really a lot about the institution of business schools and the networks of business schools. And I was researching what different programs had to offer. In the end, I only applied to 4 programs, and I was luckily accepted to 3 of them. I was mostly scouting executive MBA programs, primarily because of my age, and I thought that they would be more appropriate for the type of education I would be getting in the time. A lot of the reasons, I'll jump around a bit, that I went with RSM is I really had an affinity for the timeline of the program, which is a year-long program, its location, and the fact that it was overseas. So the programs that I applied to were USC, Pepperdine, RSM, which is at the time the only full-time program that I applied to, and then also Tsinghua University.
Yeah, Tsinghua is in China, for those of you who might not be familiar with it. It's one of the most well-regarded universities in China.
Tsinghua is an amazing school in China, and I had some international relations with some larger Chinese companies, and there's so much economic development going on in Asia, especially with the West, that I knew that I wanted to be a part of that in a way, either in Europe or in Asia. Went with Europe happily then and now, and I'm sure I would have had just an equally fulfilling experience in Asia as well. That was a strange interview process with Tsinghua. You know, with a lot of these programs, I think you almost immediately identify whether the fit is correct or not. And during that interview, as it went on and on, I realized more and more, this is not a good fit. Even just the way that we were communicating with each other and the faces that we were making at each other and sort of the responses to responses, it didn't feel like it was right, which is completely different than how it was with the other programs like USC and Pepperdine, and especially RSM. With RSM, from moment one, it felt correct. With every person that I spoke to, and the more I networked with the school and the alumni and the current students, the fit was there. And so was the education in my mind.
So when you were assessing fit, and when you mentioned interview with, say, Tsinghua, are you talking about the actual admissions interview, or are you talking about pre-applying?
No. Pre-applying, everyone's very polite at every institution. They're looking to foster relationships. They're looking for new clients. They're looking for new students. And they produce products at the same time, you being the product of their MBA program. So they're scouting the right type of people that work for them as well. This was an admissions interview, and it was just awkward from the get-go. I had to do it. I was in LA, so the timing was weird. I think I did it at midnight or 1 a.m. And I'm talking to a room of 4 or 5 people. Only one of them spoke English perfectly well. I think he might have even been American or studied in the West. And he was incredibly nice, but it was not a flowing conversation. It was very weird. And it definitely gave me the vibe that this is how the education might be, and that might not be the right experience for me to be conducive to learning what I wanted.
Because, I mean, I'm sure there's some other listeners who are, say, in their mid-late 30s, right? And they're kind of they're in that boundary line, as you were, between EMBA and MBA. So did you, reach out to all these schools that you applied to and ask them about, okay, well, where am I a better fit, USC, EMBA, or MBA, What could you tell us about that process?
I did. It was a good process, and it helped me weed out a lot of schools because I was almost prematurely rejected by a lot of schools in conversation. Um, I spoke to, so out of my Europe scouting, I spoke to the Copenhagen Business School. I love Denmark. I made a TV pilot in Danish in Denmark. So I knew that I liked a lot of the people there. And even speaking to them preliminary in their admissions department, they pretty much let me know that I am not the right person to apply to their program. Whether that's my background, my age, my personality, or all three of them. The same thing happened with York. I was interested in York as well. I pretty much got the same response from them. Just to lead it back to RSM, since RSM is what we're talking about, I randomly bumped into RSM because my now fiance, then friend, soon to become girlfriend, recommended me to go check out the MBA tour. So I went in cold. They were in LA, and the MBA tour is amazing, by the way. You get a lot of exposure to a lot of different programs, and very quickly can do some one-on-ones with people and find out really if you like them or if you like the education. So I went in cold, saw a representative from RSM sitting there. His name's Vasilius. I think he's higher up in the program, and we talked for what I thought was going to be 10 minutes and turned into an hour. And he was just amazing. And the vibe that he gave me about himself and his colleagues and the education was, it's sort of like, when somebody's making the value proposition in the cell, and in your mind, you're like, tick that off, tick that off, tick that off, tick that off. And everything fell into place. A huge selling point for me, which I think came out jokingly in conversation, was he mentioned that they don't produce sharks at this program. They are a different kind of program. They are trying to promote sustainable business practices, personal leadership development, on top of the hardcore education that you're getting. There's a lot of hard and soft skills mixed in. And this appealed to me. I had a huge affinity for everything he was saying.
So then you decided to submit an application. And so let's talk about that.
I put all my eggs in the RSM basket. At the same time, I had decided to also continue applying to the two EMBA programs that I liked that were in Los Angeles.
Okay, so they were EMBA programs. Got it.
So USC and Pepperdine were EMBA programs. RSM was the only full-time program.
There's so many questions I have about your application process. Let's start with the GMAT.
Yes, I recommend the GRE. for
Great response. Reasons. Okay, why?
For I don't know if this applies to everybody. I'm gonna blanket this and say maybe for older applicants. For those of you who don't have a quant background and have not been engaged in education or used to churning out the type of content that you were when you were in high school or in college, the GRE was perfect for me. It focused more on general math. So I was back into geometry. I was back into algebra, statistics, which I wish I had learned more of. That's quite a prerequisite for an MBA program. And I really had brushed it off trying to nail other subjects more. I can't stress analytics and statistics enough for anyone preparing for an MBA program.
I mean, anything more specific than that, like statistics, analytics? I mean, that can be like what type of analytics?
Yeah. So basically, the majority of it is statistics and being able to calculate a lot of the mean and the median of any type of topic or subject that you're looking at, whether that is figuring out how accurate cheese filling machines are calibrated at factories or to types of responses you get from open surveys. And being able to survey people and gather data in that way is at the core foundation, I think, of, I can't speak for every program, a lot of RSM, but I assume most MBA programs. So having understood and being able to speak the language of analytics, analysis, statistics is at the core of everything. And it especially leads into other things like if you're interested in supply chain and you're trying to glean insights from management science techniques and applying algebra, you're always going to pull it back into stats. So the GRE was really helpful for me because it gave me a few sort of points. Number one, relearning how to learn was a steep learning curve. And preparing for the GRE got me back in the mode of studying, producing content, taking tests, go back, refocusing, finding out where problem areas were, building upon those, going again. And I took the GRE multiple times until I got a score that I was satisfied with. Some of the scores were adequate and met the demands of the programs, but still wanted more. And this was a lot of prep work for the program as well. There were other quant programs that I took and studied while preparing for the GRE, which I have to just plug a couple of them now. I wish I was for these. I used Magoosh tutoring services, which were amazing in the Magoosh program. All video content, really straightforward, very easy to digest. I also used MBA math, which was quite helpful. And none of these are required, but if you were like me and you were going back into subjects that you had never mastered or even flirted with in the first place, this was quite useful for really putting yourself back in that position of studying and even learning new topics, because it was tough and it was a struggle at first, and especially in the first part of the program as well, which is very quant heavy. And yes, I wish I was even more prepared having gone in.
That's a great tip. So I'll be sure to link to MBA Tour, Magoosh, MBA Math on the show notes, so you guys can check that out. I mean, you have such a unique background, right? Like being in storytelling and visual arts. And so I'm wondering if that kind of influenced how you prepared your application, if at all. Maybe you could share your top 2 or 3 tips for applying.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. So I have a very non-traditional background. I come from the arts. I'm a creative. And I always used to think that I was a artist with a business mindset. And sort of early on in this process, I realized that I was actually a creative business person. And using that and building upon the creativity in my profile and how non-traditional I was really helped me with a unique value proposition to these programs about what I had to offer and my point of view. It also became quite handy later in the program because I definitely saw things differently and was able to strategize in different ways when we were tackling problems, challenges, projects, and it was quite useful. Again, a lot of the cohort had engineering backgrounds. A lot of them were analysts. A lot of them came from consulting. And so they completely different walks of life. And especially RSM, and again, I can't speak to other schools, maybe this is built into a lot of programs, but they push a lot of psychology, organizational behavior, emotional intelligence, personal leadership development. And a lot of these corner around basic storytelling pillars, which I know very well, because you need to be a top-down communicator. You need to be able to collaborate. You need to be an active listener, a complex problem solver. And all of these things are skill sets that I had baked in already, which I was really able to not just rest upon, but utilize in all of these different situations. In fact, in one of our classes, there's storytelling and narrative theory a bit so that you can present yourself, your ideas, and your projects in clear ways. So I think storytelling is a huge, huge benefit for me, and I think it's something that everyone can always build upon.
Concretely, how did that factor into the way you positioned yourself and your goals in your application, especially as an older candidate? And what were your career goals? And then we can jump into, how those may have changed during your time at RSM. But yeah, how did you pitch yourself essentially?
So I pitched myself as a creative with a business mindset, and I pitched myself as a natural collaborator because I come from the arts where it is all collaboration. I know every business is a people business, but in the arts especially, and I think in the business world as well, projects are the outcome and building relationships are the process. And so in order to build relationships, to get to those projects and to get to those businesses, you really need to be able to strategize clearly with your teammates, your team members, your cohorts, in order to have a clear streamline of communication so that everyone is on the same page always, especially when you are pitching a show, pitching a movie, pitching yourself, or sitting as an audience member listening to a PowerPoint pitch or a film pitch. You have to be able to follow along and make things easy to digest, or else there's no conversation to be had. I'm not demonstrating that well now because we're jumping all over the place, but I'll do a lot of touchbacks and callbacks once people are familiar with everything. So I use this a lot in my essay, for instance, was I don't want to use the negative connotation, but it was a very emotional essay where I was trying to be my authentic and unique self. I cracked a few jokes. I was very open. I talked about my many flaws and shortcomings and how I wanted to build upon those, improve those, and even translate them into different skill sets and mix them with new skills. My idea with going to business school is not only, as I mentioned, because I didn't know what I didn't know, and I had multiple introductions in different industries and sectors, with building different companies, advising a few people, working on some, and my own. And you think that cannabis and entertainment are entirely different. They're quite similar. You're producing a product or a service as you are in everything else. And being able to talk about these, pitch these, strategize them, build a value creation model off of them, these are all very similar and have a lot of crossover. My idea with what would my life be like after I got this 3-letter degree, the MBA, it was three-pronged, I guess. One was I wanted to have more opportunity in other industries, as well as be able to climb the ladder in different ways in my industry. Also, I wanted to be more open to international roles. I was sort of locked into LA for the most part, and wanted to be able to find opportunity outside of LA. And there's plenty of entertainment happening all over the world, but not necessarily for people who don't offer international experience or have more business backgrounds. So I thought that would be quite beneficial to me. At the same time, I was even considering doing triple jumps, new place, new industry, new role, because there were so many things that I started getting interested in, especially during school. So that was before school. I was like, fantasizing about all these sort of different opportunities that could come from and different ways to utilize the education, not only inside my own roles, my own industry, but others. And then as I got to school and started going through programs and case studies and different formats of the curriculum, realizing that there were so many other opportunities out there that I didn't even know about. I had been an independent consultant for years. I had never considered consulting for a larger firm. I'm very interested in that now. I didn't realize that MBA programs were large feeders to big consultancies. Little naive about what the business world had to offer. Glad I know it now. And there's so much more, I think, the opportunity, especially in Europe, for somebody who is a creative business person and is able to sort of slide back and forth from each side of your brain, from the left to the right. I find that most people are in one or the other. And a lot of the value that people see in me is I'm talking to a lot of these companies and clients that they really particularly latch on to that. They don't, I don't know how, it's probably not true and they're being very polite, but they seem to really latch on to the fact that I am creative and business-minded at the same time.
I have one last question on the admissions part, because you talked about how you admitted your flaws. Okay. Now, this is something very interesting. I'm curious whether those were personal flaws or professional flaws or both.
Oh, a little of both. My idea about what I thought the MBA would be, besides the curriculum and the education, which it certainly was a transformative experience. And unless you are, I know it's a cliche phrase, but unless you're pushed out of your comfort zone or you're willing to admit and do a lot of self-reflection about where your flaws are, you can never build upon them or improve them. You will just deflect and deter and avoid. And that's not conducive to a transformative experience. Not one where you especially want to come out as, you start the ordinary person, you want to come out the extraordinary person, much like a hero in a hero's journey when they go on their adventure. And I think without coming to terms with knowledge I lacked, experience I lacked, or personal development that I lacked, or emotional intelligence that I wanted to build on, without acknowledging all of these things, I wouldn't be able to assess how I wanted to develop more. Because I knew I wanted to learn more. That was obvious, so I was applying to educational institutes. But there is certainly more personal development that I wanted to do. So yes, I was very forward about this, not only in my conversations with people, but especially in my essays as well, where I thought I really had a free platform for a non-judgmental type of compelling confession, where all of these things are right with me, and all of these things I would like to be right with me. And here are the things that I'm constantly working on. And I find that I always talk about these things, even in conversations or in interviews, because I want to be constantly improving and always developing into a newer, better iteration of myself. And school really helps with that.
Well, let's, God, I absolutely love what you just said, and we'll probably clip that 3 minutes to kind of promote the show. Because I just think that's a really hard thing for a lot of candidates when you're applying to these elite institutions to admit any sort of flaws. But it's exactly what you said. How are you going to transform without knowing where you can or where you could transform? Let's talk about your RSM experience. I sent you some questions, but I really want to just give you free rein here. What was your favorite part of the experience? What really surprised you is a key question because of, you didn't know what you didn't know, right? So what surprised you? Let's start there.
We can start there. I can sort of touch upon it in sort of a lot of things I want to touch about the RSM experience, because it was so amazing and there's so much. We can't cover all of it. And we'll have to, at some point, get to the part where we talk about what it was like during COVID as well. I don't have a favorite part about my MBA experience. There are 3 topics that I'd love to just mention really fast, which are a huge aspect of the experience, which are myself and where I started and where I ended, the people I met, and the content. So I went in with a purpose, which was to soak up all the knowledge. And as an older candidate, I turned 40 during the program. I just turned 41 this year. I was not the oldest. I think I was the second oldest. And there were quite a few people that were close in age. I think the average age for the cohort, which was only 150 students, was 31. And for me, as an older student, it was such a more calming experience for me, because I wasn't distracted with popularity. I wasn't nervous about deadlines. I wasn't nervous about reactions to viewpoints that I shared in class. I wasn't nervous about grades. I didn't care if I got the highest grade. I wasn't going to in the first place. But I cared about the experience and the education rather than the performance aspects. Of course I cared about the performance. But the bar that I was setting was for myself, and it was not in competition with everybody else. For the people, this is a unique program that's really amazing, because 99% of it is international. So we're all fresh off the boat from our own countries. There is a huge mix of Americans, Indians, Taiwanese people from all over from South America, Peru, Argentina, Chile, Brazil. It goes on and on. And as different as we all are, we're so similar. And we found that even though we grew up in different cultures, speaking different languages, we kind of all did the same thing. We all did the same poor childish pranks. We all had similar experiences and jokes, and there was so much alike about all of us. And there were so many opportunities to give and receive support from people that you think are such a contrast to yourself, but you find out are so much closer than you could imagine. A lot of that focused the transition to the content for a minute, because the people, me, and the content were the trifecta, the huge mix. And there were some benefits about RSM that I didn't know I was going to get, and I found to be a lot of the value of the program, besides all the foundation education, of course. We have a teacher there, Nicholas Consoneco. He taught us self-marketing and how to really prep and pitch yourself to companies, to interviews, how to operate in a business mindset with consultants. Taught us case cracking, which turned out to be one of my favorite things to do on a Friday night, is sitting around and solving business puzzles. It's actually more fun than it sounds. And how to conduct yourself in different environments, and really getting back to this notion of top-down clear communication, not sort of non-linear rambling like I'm doing now. Two more aspects of the program, which I specifically want to talk about because I don't know which other programs offer these two components, are our LMP program, which is our Living Management program, and our study trips. I'll come back to the study trip in 1 second because it was virtual thanks to COVID, but the LMP program we have is a class where it's called the Living Management Project, and you actually solve a business problem for a real name brand business. You're divided up into teams, and you are tackling one of their problems as consultants, and you are delivering a solution at the end through a month-long process where you are analyzing aspects of the business or certain segments or sectors and trying to figure out exactly how to aid them. And some of these methods are used, and some of these solutions are applied to their businesses, and that's an amazing feeling. It's also very fun to tackle these problems. They're like case cracking on a much more extended consulting role position. And so you get a lot of feel for what that's like. It's so much fun. It's really unique. It's something I really enjoyed. We did a similar thing on our study trip. So RSM also has study trips where you go for, we didn't do it, so I don't know the length of time. We did it virtually. 10 to 14 days at another institution all over the world. It was in Estonia, one was at UCLA, one was in Iceland, Spain, where you go and you take an elective. Mine was digital transformation in Estonia because their entire country is online. You can do everything. I think there's a record for being able to start a business in under 9 minutes online there. Amazing country. Yeah, you can do it. You can do it now. It's really incredible. They have their voting online, like everything. It's incredible. So I did digital transformation, and I got to work with the electives are mixed with EMBAs. So I got to work with some of our EMBAs. I was blown away by the EMBAs and their careers that they were maintaining while going to school. I don't know if I could have done it in hindsight. It's, again, I've never churned out so much content in such a short amount of time, especially in this 1-year program. So working with the EMBAs, for my digital transformation class, I got to go to his company. We tackled a real life problem that he was working on in his department, come up with solutions for it and different avenues to explore, present to the class. It was like another mini consulting project. I had so much fun and just really relished in the material that I went and got certified in digital transformation afterwards. This was another thing that I think was, I'll get to COVID and this will be my lead into COVID. RSM worked out a deal with Coursera and offered any courses that you can take I think it was in a 3 or 4 month period, completely free. So I took advantage of that in some of my downtime, and I got certified in digital.
You had downtime?
Well, listen, my downtime was like 2 hours a day when I wasn't pulling the hair out of my head.
There you go.
and on weekends a little bit. So I went and got certified in digital transformation from BCG at Darden, and then brand management and project management. I got a third one in finance for non-financial professionals, where I just wanted to do that to see how my performance in finance and what I was able to apply to an outside RSM test and how I performed there. I passed, like, all these certificates. It was very fun, not just to do them and be able to apply a lot of my learnings and see how that translated into other sort of testing parameters. So, digital transformation suddenly became a huge interest of mine by happenstance. And that brings us a little bit to COVID. When I think about my experience, so school started January of 2020.
January 2020, yeah.
And the world began to fall apart somewhere around March of 2020. We went into, I don't remember the exact date, we went into full lockdown somewhere around April or May. In Holland in particular, we had lockdown and a curfew. So we went into lockdown, we went into curfew for the majority of the last year. And during, I think it was spring break around March, school in person was completely canceled and it all got transformed online. Being in school during COVID was not so bad. I think it might have been the best place to be during a pandemic. I came out with an MBA. I was on a fixed income. I had daily purpose and reasons to apply myself. And I was fortunate enough to be around some of the smartest minds, PhDs, brilliant cohort. A lot of these people had their finger on the economic pulse of development, analysis of what was happening. A lot of my friends became tutors as we were all trying to make up for the gap between the digital transformation online versus what was in person and the interactions that, or lack thereof, that you would get with each other and the professors. I think that there was a bit of diminished value, the lack of networking, the lack of in-person recruiting, being locked in a shoebox apartment for a year. I think that a lot of, when you get an MBA, you're not just purchasing an education, you're purchasing the alumni network, the current cohort who are your friends, who you learn, the teachers themselves, the name brand, all of these things. And I don't know that I got to take advantage of them as much as I would have pre-pandemic.
So let me be clear. You, since March, didn't take an in-person class at RSM? Because the program is January to December, right? So basically you had 2 or 3 months of in-person, and then you had the rest of the time was all virtual? Is that?
For the most part.
Oh my goodness.
There were government regulations that constantly changed. So I did go back to school a few times.
Wow.
Somewhere around July or August, I had my first in-person class again. That got cut shortly after some COVID cases started coming up when people were getting back together again. Also, the Dutch government, they were a little bipolar in when things were open and when things were closed, and they opened and closed the country multiple times throughout the year. I went back to campus a few more times for, I think, one more class and then a few random times to be able to use school facilities. But yes, I would say 60-70% of it ended up being online.
But what about like social stuff? Like, were you even able to see your classmates for beers or drinks or just hanging out, cracking the cases? Or is it all virtually?
A lot of it was virtual.
Wow.
Of course, some people were hanging out together in maybe larger parties or groups than they should have been. Me and my girlfriend, we sort of segregated and pulled back into our own bubble of just the two of us for months.
Okay, let's rewind. So your girlfriend also was attending RSM at the same time as you.
We started this MBA journey together, and we started researching schools at the same time. Our relationship developed a little bit after that. In fact, she turned me on to the MBA tour where I got introduced to RSM, and I came right home and said, "I think I found a gem. I found a diamond in the rough. Go to the MBA tour and check this out." We applied to schools together, helped each other out doing this. studied together, prepared for the GRE together, both got accepted and came to the Netherlands together. She graduated from the same program at the same time. And during this interview, she's just walked in to reload some groceries. So we both got our MBAs together, which was such an amazing experience because not knowing anyone and already having a built-in relationship, we were put in the same. They divide the cohorts into 3 units and then smaller individual teams, but we were in the same unit in the first term that was in person. So we were able to help each other out a bit. It was such a valuable resource emotionally to me, and I think to her too. Did that answer some of the questions about having a relationship during an MBA?
Yeah. Most of them.
What are the ones we didn't touch upon?
Well, no. I mean, I just think that's just a really nice wrinkle to your story that your friend became a girlfriend and then became your fiance during your MBA. I mean, that
we got engaged maybe 3 months ago, shortly after graduation, in a tulip field here in Holland, something that sort of represented our experience here. So I've had an amazing transformative experience throughout the MBA program. It's also something that I wanted to touch upon for a second. I don't know if most people, I certainly was naive and didn't understand this when I embarked on this journey, but it's such a longer transitionary period in your life from starting the process of scouting schools and deciding that a program might be right for you, to the application process, to the testing process, to the traveling and starting process, going through, graduating, finding your first post-MBA job, maybe moving to another country or another city, and then settling into that new role in either that same or maybe new career. So I'm still in transition and I'm still in that process. And it's probably been a little over 2 years since I've started, and I don't expect it to end anytime soon. So just so everyone knows, it's a long transition.
right, even with a 1-year program.
Even with a 1-year program.
And okay, so I mean, I have to ask you about this because I think it touches on what so many applicants this fall are going to be thinking about, right? When they're applying to these programs. Because you took basically 60% of the class, virtually, I mean, you are essentially doing an online MBA, right? Even though you're in Holland.
My bad joke with my friends is my MBA turned into online accounting school.
Right? So I know I'm putting you in a tough position here, but I'm curious to get your ideas on you mentioned some of the things you missed out on, like the in-person recruiting, the in-person sort of networking physically. But do you think like the online MBA could be as valuable as the in-person one, or were you a bit let down by it?
Yes and no. I mean, there was a lot of 2020 where everyone was just trying to figure things out, including the administration and the faculty as well. And they're also dealing with their own lives at the same time. And this, affects everybody. So I had never considered an online MBA program before. And now having sort of gone through a hybrid one, it's actually something that I would be open to. If you are solely interested in the education and the curriculum being the majority of your experience, online MBA programs I think are great. You do figure out how to navigate and conduct yourself in the Zoom environment, how to interact with people, how to talk to people, how to ask questions. The faculty had to figure this out themselves as well. Some people took naturally to it, some did not. I think a lot of the curriculum that we were still being taught was designed for in-person and not all of it translated 100% of the way to online learning. It is something that, knowing what the world has gone through this year and how a lot of people's experiences had to transform online, it's something that I would be interested in. But I do think that this is only when comparing to an in-person program. I do think that it's a diminished experience compared to in-person. I do not think it's a diminished experience on its own. I think it's quite valuable. And I think even as an EMBA program, it might be quite valuable because a lot of the EMBAs who I went to school with, they were really set in their careers and liked their businesses and liked their roles and liked their companies. And they wanted to build more skill sets in order to make bigger impact there for themselves and for their companies. And I think that's a great opportunity for EMBAs. For MBA students, I think it really depends on what you're trying to get out of it because it's very time consuming. Your whole life will get flipped upside down. It's very demanding, whether it's online or in person. And I think that if you are looking to switch careers, if you're looking to expand, if you're looking to do more, and you're a bit younger, I don't think there's any substitute for in-person personal development.
Let's talk about the recruiting aspect, right? Because I imagine, I'm just trying to put myself in your shoes, and I would be probably like, okay, everyone's doing the best they can, right? With the program and students and faculty, we're doing the best we can, but gosh darn it, this was my time to transition, and I'm in Holland, and I'm trying to, get the best job I can after investing so much time and money into a program, and now I'm just on Zoom. How has that been challenging? And because I think this will be really great for our listeners who will likely have to face some version of this. I mean, hopefully we kill this virus, but it'll likely be with us for a while. So there might be a lot of interruptions, right? Yeah, just recruiting in a sort of virtual environment, even though you're in the country and you're a foreigner. I mean, that's a lot in there, but what has your experience been? What advice would you have to give?
Yeah. And we're talking with post-MBA job recruiting right now, correct? So
visas, how that all works. Yeah.
Completely. Well, I guess there's a few different parts to it, right? There's the scouting and research of role process. There is the actual interviewing and recruitment process, the visa process, and the moving. Because we were heavily focused our school year in 2020, employers were not hiring at the time.
Say again? I'm sorry, I misheard that.
Employers were not hiring at the time, or not many. And it was quite difficult looking for work, not just during the program, but especially in the beast, in the belly of the beast of 2020. I think that's changed now, and a lot of companies are opening up, not just with countries opening up, but being able to adjust their budgets and start bringing on more staff again. It's been very difficult re-entering the job economy at this time. I can only relate this personally, right? Especially for me as an alien in a different country, it's been difficult. I chose Holland. The Netherlands is amazing. It's a very international country. They speak amazing English. I think they speak the best English for a non-native English country. So it's really easy to communicate with people here. The recruitment process has been quite challenging, quite easy, and quite difficult all at the same time. Many people have secured employment virtually, even in other locations in other countries. The entire process takes place online, mostly over Zoom. You still go through all the same processes. You go through 4 or 5 rounds of interviews. You do your case or business studies and your testing and your programs, and you're doing a lot of it like this on the screen. It's been really interesting to sort of go through it and try to figure out how to adapt your process to sort of the new normal on Zoom. So RSM has a career services department, which is amazing. These people help you rebrand yourself, reframe your story, work on interview and sort of how to tackle a lot of these interview obstacles and questions. Tell me about a time when you did this. Tell me a story about that. When you failed, when you had a challenge, when you succeeded. And you develop these and work on these stories. And you really are taught how to present your digital footprint so that it mirrors, if not builds upon, your physical footprint and who you are. And yeah, this has all occurred online. So it's been different. Um, going through the interview processes with people virtually like this, you're doing a lot more selling, I think, and pitching of yourself because you're not able to read people the same way as when you're in a room with someone. And you don't really get an understanding of how they sit, how they talk, how they breathe. Even though we're talking and breathing and sitting in front of each other right now, it's not the same, and you don't get the same from it. I personally think that, like many other industries and many other functions in our world, COVID has shed a light on where I personally believe the recruitment process is broken. I think that there is a huge problem with the way recruiters and HR departments and talent development departments operate. Again, this is a personal opinion. This is not of the schools. I don't know. This is of all of my friends who got amazing, successful positions that they wanted, or ones that got ones that they needed. But I think that the process of ATS systems and CVs and cover letters, they're not weeding out the right people. I think they weed out the wrong people. And I think that unless you hit a certain target or meet all the preconceived notions or components of a CV or keywords in a cover letter that are come down the line in a bureaucratic and red tape way, you don't make it past certain levels. I also have experienced personally and from other people, there is a fair level of ghosting right now, which I'm glad people are starting to talk about. And of course, I think that has something to do with the fact that there are so many more job seekers right now.
Define ghosting for our audience.
Definitely. So ghosting is when you start a relationship with someone in any capacity, and then you disappear. You stop all communication. You might not ever communicate with that person again. There were recruiters for certain positions and roles where I went through multiple rounds of interviews and was expecting the next one to occur and was told to prepare for the next one, and then radio silence from the interviewer, from the recruiter, everybody all around. No response to any email, phone call, voicemail, LinkedIn message.
To this day?
At all. To this day. This has happened multiple times. I'm not the only one. I think it's a huge topic that is now starting to get talked about, and I hope people talk about it more. So ghost, again, it could have been causation is not correlation. It could have had something to do with the pandemic and the amount of job seekers that were looking for work at the time who are still looking for work, or it could just be sort of a byproduct of the digital age that we're living in and the access to all of the communication where you don't really need to continue communication with someone because there's always somebody else. At the same time, being able to network with people like this under these circumstances wouldn't have been possible 10 years ago, 20 years ago, without all of the technology that we have to do this now. There's an amazing platform that I use that my fiance actually turned me on to called Lunch Club, lunchclub.ai. Do you know this, Darren?
Nope, I'm writing it down.
Lunchclub.ai is an amazing service. You can go on and set up virtual video chats with anybody around the world to chat about anything. You can chat to investors, people in business development, people in marketing, people in different roles who you just want to glean insights from. I do 3 of these a week. And it's a great platform where I can meet new people in new companies and new industries, practice digital conversations and virtual conversations. And I've even managed to do some great networking from it and got some private clients from it, and always leave a conversation with being able to meet somebody else. Right? The goal of any conversation is leave with 2 more contacts, no matter what you're doing. And that has been more useful to me than cold applying to jobs in a traditional recruitment process. Online, submitting your paperwork, waiting for a return, maybe networking with the person or the recruiter and trying to start a conversation with them.
A few words that really stuck out to me. Keyword red tape. keyword red tape. I've never heard it put that way, but I think that's so insightful, and it's kind of at the core, it seems, at why you think the traditional recruiting system is broken. So what would be those keywords? Like, is it Harvard University is not on your resume? You know, is it a prestige old boys club thing? Or is it, what are these keywords that applicants should be aware of?
Yeah. Harvard's a great keyword, I think, on any CV. You know, it's so funny. I think, and this has been from my experience, I think there's a few things. One is there's a very bureaucratic process, which is all the red tape that's very slow. And because employers have so much reign to choose from such a larger pool of job seekers right now, that they can specify a lot of things. And when you are applying to jobs, another handy tool like Lunch Club or Magoosh that I've been using is JobScan. JobScan, doing a lot of plugs here without a lot of payments. JobScan is a great platform where you can take the job posting, copy and paste it into one side, and on the other side, put your CV or your cover letter, and it'll match up keywords of what they were looking for in the posting and what is in your CV. So there are ways to try to game these systems to present yourself in the right way, especially if you're right for the role. So there's ATS systems that weed through all of these resumes, that weed a lot of people out who don't meet certain criteria, like a couple of these keywords. So because you framed a metric or an achievement at one of your roles not the way it was inputted into the computer, it does not resonate.
Wait, what's an ATS system?
Yeah.
What does that stand for?
Well, now that you put me on the spot, I need to Google it. But the ATS systems are resume screening systems
okay. I see.
That are looking for the right attributes for roles and candidates.
That's the important part. That we just know what it is. Wow.
So there are platforms like JobScan that help you sort of align your profile more with what was inputted into the computer and what the software and the AI is looking for out of a CV. And if you make it through that stage, then you have to get through what more often than not is a very young early career recruiter who might not understand or be familiar with all the teams that they're hiring roles for or doing early process weeding out for. So I've experienced this many times where my application or my CV and my cover letter, not the cover letter, because that's where you explain yourself a bit more and try to bridge the gap between who you are and who your CV is, where your CV is not really interpreted the right way by the right person who may not understand all of the things on it or how that might apply to the role. They're only looking for key attributes that they were given on a list for the role. And they're getting what's given to them after the AI has gone through it. So they're working what they have. And then they're going through that process trying to see, okay, who closely aligns to these four KPIs I'm looking for, these 4 benchmarks, these 4 metrics, these 4 keywords. And you could be completely right for the role and not have framed your stories correctly. Or you could be completely wrong and have used all the correct keywords by purpose or happenstance and suddenly be able to make it through that process. That doesn't mean you're getting the job. That means that you've made it through this part of the system. So I think a lot of recruitment is broken in this way. Personally, I had a lot of experience where I was talking to very young recruiters who didn't even understand my industries or what I did in them, even after being explained to them. So there are instances like that. So for me, touching back on what I said, a while ago, a lot earlier in this conversation, is I came seeking out an MBA because I wanted to work at larger corporations. I've always been working at startups, at smaller companies, and I wanted to work in a bigger corporation. And I found that it was quite difficult to achieve that goal, especially during COVID and a little after. Having gone through life and having different experiences, different industries that these recruiters didn't quite understand because they weren't familiar with them at all, or understood the crossover. or how it translated into the new skills.
So where are you now? Like, what are you doing? What work are you doing? What work are you looking for? Where are you in that hero's journey?
Yeah. Oh, no. There you go. Right keywords for the conversation. It's such an exciting time. So my fiance received an amazing role in the UK. So I am now refocusing my job search in the UK. I've landed smaller clients like I always have throughout life in different areas in business and creative. I'm under NDA. I can't talk about them. These are all different kinds of projects that I'm doing. One was raising capital for a company for their new fund. Another one is working with venture capital about their portfolio mix. But I'm still seeking a role at a larger corporation, especially as an alien who's trying to go to a third country now, who's going to require visa sponsorship. So I'm still on that pursuit. Being able to continue to operate as an independent consultant and contractor is fine. In fact, there's so much more I can offer since I've built up my rep and my portfolio and my skill set so much more thanks to the MBA.
And how much are you in touch with the RSM still now? And I'm sure many students are, or graduates, I should say, are still trying to find their ideal first post-MBA job. Like, how active a role do they play in that?
Oh, so I've been bad about it in the last month, but I still do weekly meetings with my career coaches. They're incredible. They want to help you find a role that you want in the industry that you want. These are incredibly kind, empathetic, knowledgeable people who come from recruiting and talent development, and they are there for you throughout the entire process. And they've been so beneficial to me, and I know to a lot of my cohort too. I just can't speak for all of them, in helping them secure their post-MBA roles.
Wow.
They're amazing. Yeah.
That's one of the few ringing endorsements I've ever heard on the podcast. Most students, even at, whatever program, they're generally disappointed with, maybe they have just kind of the wrong expectations as well, but yeah, that's the feeling I usually get.
So I've been fortunate enough to work with the right people in the career services department, the ones that were personally assigned to me and ones who I seeked out for independent advice or counsel on something. And they're all so knowledgeable and so kind, and they care. And they care about seeing it. Yeah, they're not just outgoing, empathetic people, but they actually want to see you succeed and try to set you up for success. That doesn't mean that the career services department is not flawed in a certain number of ways. As I mentioned earlier, I thought that there was a huge lack of recruiting opportunities. It couldn't happen in person. I think it could have happened more virtually. I think that there was less exposure to a lot of really interesting companies that you might not have been directly exposed to just in a solo, independent, cold application process, who come and seek out MBAs, specifically for different roles at their companies. So I think that it was lacking there. And it's never career services' fault when you don't achieve what you set out for. And it's certainly not their fault in the least bit when you don't get the kind of responses that you want. That just means that you need to develop and evolve and start behaving differently. So there's no complaints about career services. Do I wish that they offered more things? Totally. Do I think that some of that might have been diminished because of COVID? Of course. Was a lot of that out of their hands? Yes. A ton of it was out of their hands. Maybe their top, I don't know this for a fact, I'm just giving an example. Maybe their top 10 recruiters who pick up 20% of the class every year wasn't hiring or didn't come that year. That could very much be the case. With that being said, finding a job, re-entering the job economy post or during pandemic. We're not post-pandemic yet, though. People like using that phrase. It's been very difficult for everybody. And a lot of people went back into not their old roles, but an iteration of their old roles in their old industries, some with their old companies, some in almost a very similar role, but of course their new skill sets in new companies. But everyone was very behind on the metrics of where people were in the previous cohorts at when and where in the timeline they found their positions. Because, every MBA program has that pitch deck, that pamphlet that says 40% within this, 80% within 2 days of starting the program, within 30 days of graduation. And I think for a lot of people in this program, and I'm sure around the world, they were all behind on those metrics this year, and they didn't compare.
Yeah. I mean, it's a strange time for all of us, but yeah, especially MBA students too, and graduates. I've just really enjoyed this conversation and learning a lot, from you, Justin. I just want to give you an open-ended last question. You talked about not knowing what you didn't know, and now that you've gone through the shortlisting of schools, the application to schools, the non-COVID experience, the COVID experience, the recruiting, you're in the middle of your recruiting process right now. What do you just kind of wish you knew before this whole thing? You mentioned it's a long transition. I'm wondering, if you just had any last words about kind of what you wish you knew. I mean, that's why people are tuning into the show.
Of course. Should we apply this to the scope of older candidates or all candidates?
Both.
So I wish I knew how much personal development was going to be involved and what a transformative experience it was going to be, like I've mentioned earlier on. I was not in store for the type of emotional intelligence applications in the classes, into the individual projects, and how much psychology and organizational behavior would play into it. Loved it. Want more of it. I wish I knew how heavy quant would be in the MBA program. I know you expect it to be heavy. It's a business program. It's incredibly heavy. I wish I had done a bit more preparation prior to starting, because my first semester, I was thrown into the deep end of management science, of analytics for business, and it was difficult. It was really difficult, especially in an accelerated program that moves very fast. So if you start at, in a class, you start at in the 3-hour class, you start at level 1 and they end up at level 30. And if you get lost at level 10, 11 is challenging, 12 is impossible, 13 you're completely lost. So I wish I had done more prep work prior. The GRE or the GMAT really preps you and helps you, for I think a lot of people, not for me, refamiliarize yourself with a lot of these concepts, whereas I was learning them fresh. But definitely much more studying to begin with. I think for people, for non-native English speakers, I highly recommend the GRE if the school you're looking at will accept it. There is a lot of focus on vocabulary and grammar, and now having gone to school in an international program that's taught in English, it's a necessity, especially for all of the communications, all of the reports, and all of the way of being able to discuss all of these projects. You have to be a clear communicator and a collaborator. So let me just make sure. Be prepared for psychology. Study lots of math.
Just on the study math point, would you recommend anything beyond MBA math or would preparation be taking the core offered by other top business schools online before?
I wish I had gone back and taken an online class, like a really structured class, other than going at my own pace, or being able to decide what I wanted to learn from those or different components of those programs, and doing an actual registered class. If I could afford it, I would have gone with more tutors to have gone through. Definitely, because it made it much more challenging for me and much more time consuming, where I wasn't able to really soak up sort of the other components of the first semester, because I was really busy focused just trying to keep my head above water in these areas. Gotcha. And for the engineers and the analysts, this was nothing new to them. and they were really able to just sort of spit this stuff out and then focus on their development on the things that they were on to learn. Whereas I struggled with this a lot, and learning it there and overcoming it was amazing. It was an amazing experience to be able to not only learn those things then, but be able to apply them every day in life now. But yes, study more. There's never enough quant. And maybe if you can figure this out at the school you're applying to, figure out what that first semester curriculum is and go and study those subjects. Because the entire transitionary process from life back to a student setting, and in a curriculum where you're not operating in a business atmosphere with your colleagues, you're now in an educational system, sitting at a desk in a room with your backpack or your briefcase every day. Being more prepared for the specific tailored program would be highly beneficial, because everything else is so distracting.
That's great advice. So I cut you off mid-sentence. You were listing off a few more things. What you wish you knew?
Yeah, I wish I knew about all the personal development. I wish I knew about all of the quant, or how detailed it was. The other thing, which I thought I did a good job of this, but maybe not enough, is I think understanding who the alumni network and where their expertise lies. I thought I did a good job, and I wish I did a better job of networking more with the current cohort of the school that you're applying to and the alumni to find out really what they found beneficial from the program, and if they ended up sort of using a lot of the learnings of the program, or even in their roles where they were. RSM, a lot of the reason I chose the program, besides its people, its faculty, it's being cornered in sustainability, its location, its price for the program compared to the American programs that I was accepted to, was their specialties. And RSM in particular is a very research-heavy school. Tons of research, tons of analysis, a lot of thought going into sharing research with the world. That being said, they are big in supply chain and logistics. I'm not a supply chain guy. I learned a lot. Could have learned more. And I think that there are certain programs that cater to things like this. Like if you are interested in supply chain, being at RSM in the port of Rotterdam, Europe's largest port, this is the place for supply chain. And knowing things like that will be really beneficial to incoming candidates who are looking at specific schools. I don't know what schools are great for bankers or for investment banking or for private equity or for consulting, but talking to all of these alumni and seeing exactly what they think were at their time, it depends how long it's been since they were in school. If they thought those were feeders into their current roles or the roles that you want that align with your profile, who you are, that would be really beneficial. I think any MBA value education is incredibly valuable, but I think feeding into the alumni network it's like an accelerant for that.
Yeah, it's basically like a rocket ship, right? Depending on what you want to do. Wow. Justin, thank you so much. I've learned a lot from you from this conversation, and I also do think the recruiting process is broken, and could be improved from business school side as well. I mean, that's my personal opinion. I don't know if my colleagues will appreciate me saying that. Just personally, kind of on my soapbox, because you really got me thinking about this. I think this process of recruiting and selecting people, I think it's the most important part of organizations and businesses. And I think we are at this strange point where the old ways, I think, are going to give way to new ways. And specifically, my thesis is with performance-based sort of tests, as opposed to keywords and AI screening of things that you can make up. I mean, that just doesn't make sense. But sitting someone down in a seat and asking them to do this project or that thing, I think that seems to make a lot more sense to me from both a business school and an employer perspective. So that's what I expect. But who knows? I mean, I know it's a big change and maybe more time consuming. But yeah, just using the last 5 minutes of the show to spout my opinions. But thank you so much, Justin. Really appreciate it, and thanks for taking part of your journey with us. Wishing you the best and with whenever you do get married, and we'll definitely stay in touch. So thank you very much. Appreciate the honesty.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for having me on, Darren. This was an honor, especially because Touch MBA was so influential and such a resource to me, and I've recommended it to other people as well. So being able to share my experience and hopefully promote RSM and talk about all of its great attributes to other people, or maybe how to strategize about going to business school, whether that's right, and then how to actually get into it, is really, really helpful to me, because I like helping others, and I hope this is beneficial to them.
It certainly will be. I mean, you gave us a real clear-eyed picture of what's going on and what it's like to go through a program during these pretty crazy times. So appreciate it, Justin. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Touch MBA podcast. Don't be shy. We have a mailing list. Go to touchmba.com and get yourself signed up. And we'll keep you posted with the best tips and insider interviews on how to get into your #1 school. You can also find us on Twitter